Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream. Thank you so much for tuning in for another show. Welcome to all of our members, subscribers, and viewers from all across the world. All of the time, we hear about new proposals coming in, and there's a very interesting latest proposal coming from the Egyptian and Qatari sides, talking about potentially reaching a 7-year ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. However, there were multiple reports from several days back suggesting that it was actually Hamas initiating a 5 to 7 year ceasefire agreement. We're going to talk about this ceasefire agreement or proposed ceasefire agreement alongside the details, the comments that came from the Palestinian resistance, and the likelihood of something like that happening. Alongside the statements now coming from Israel confirming that, well, disarming the Palestinians isn't something very realistic. What is the proposal including then if it's not disarming the Palestinian resistance? New proposals coming in every time. And how is that being taken in Israel? The likelihood of Benjamin Netanyahu accepting it and all of the details. But we're also going to talk about the latest moves from the universities in the United States challenging Donald Trump. 150 universities, including the action that's being taken by the most extreme in the Zionist lobby inside of the United States, working hand in hand with the Trump administration to push against all of this free speech happening in United States universities. And we're also going to talk about the attack that happened several days back and wasn't reported heavily, about a strike of Israeli fighter jets inside an Israeli settlement. But we're going to begin with the report about the ceasefire agreement. This proposed ceasefire, 5 to 10 years, according to some sources, between Israel and the Palestinian resistance. Now, this, as you can see, a Hamas proposal. Today, there were talks about the mediators having a proposal, but there was a proposal a couple of days ago from Hamas saying that, yeah, sure, 5 to 7 years ceasefire, what's the problem? This is not something new. From Hamas as a movement in particular. As a matter of fact, the spiritual leader of Hamas, Ahmad Yassin, who Israel assassinated with his 2 sons, a man who was on a wheelchair, he proposed a 40-year hudna, he called it, ceasefire between the Palestinians and Israel. Nothing too drastic in terms of lands and control, but just a very long-term ceasefire. We won't fight, no fighting, but just a long-term ceasefire. Israel, of course, didn't agree to that at the time, and Israel also refused many ceasefire agreements throughout history. Of course, peace treaties and what have you, because Israel doesn't go beyond certain limits. They need to have the ultimate authority when it comes to a Palestinian state or any potential of a ceasefire. But this is showing you dynamics coming from the Palestinian resistance, saying, yeah, we don't mind 5 to 7 years. And now, of course, there were other reports that the Qataris and the Egyptians, they had proposals coming in, and sources saying that Hamas is showing flexibility. A senior Palestinian source telling the BBC that Hamas showing unprecedented flexibility regarding the truce deal. Unprecedented flexibility, however, with the core demands. And we're going to talk about what Hamas responded in relation to the demands and the arms and what type of ceasefire they're looking at exactly. So this ceasefire that's coming from Egypt and from Qatar isn't out of the ordinary when it comes to the details of the ceasefire. So ending the hostilities, Israel withdrawing, rebuilding Gaza, the Palestinians won't leave Gaza, all aid goes in, and immediately starting to talk about international funding to rebuild Gaza. As a matter of fact, Egypt is already talking to international countries and bodies about the day after, get the funding, get the process up and running. How comes, why, and what's going to happen with the arms? What's going to happen with the weapons? Because this is what Benjamin Netanyahu has been talking about. Of course, even if that's dealt with, Netanyahu will come up with another problem, by the way, because Benjamin Netanyahu is not interested in victory or dismantling or disarming or what have you. Benjamin Netanyahu is interested in remaining in his position. The proposal now isn't talking about disarming the Palestinian resistance. The proposal that's coming is talking about setting aside the weapons, as in putting them aside. We're not going to use them. Now, we're not going to use them. Okay, but what if Israel attacks? See, this is the thing here. How can they not use them? So there will be lots of challenges in drafting the ceasefire agreement. If Hamas would agree, for example, okay, we will put our weapons aside. Well, in any case of a ceasefire, their weapons will be put on the side. There are a couple of proposals like, okay, don't show your weapons and don't do this and that. But again, if Israel does attack, well, they're going to have to use their weapons against them, because that's the main reason that they're not giving in their weapons. Hamas constantly says that the resistance arms is tied with the occupation. Get rid of the occupation, well, we're going to have an army, a sovereign state. So that's the main problem. And if there was an equal right state with equal rights between the Jordan River to the sea, no one would be talking about resistance. Now, that is something that is understood in Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu tries to make it appear as that's possible, as if this is a possibility. However, it's not a possibility, and it's not on the agenda, according to multiple reports in Israel from senior analysts alongside military strategists inside of Israel and people from the military and political establishments too. So there was one report in one of the Israeli newspapers saying that dismantling Hamas is not on the agenda. The options facing the IDF and the political echelon for continuing the war. And in this report, they were speaking about how it's actually impossible. It didn't work before to get Hamas to disarm. It wasn't possible before to get the Palestinian resistance to disarm. As a matter of fact, they only grew stronger, diversified their weapons, and became more capable with time. The Palestinian uprising in 1987 started off with stones, and then it grew. The Palestinian armed groups were passing on weapons from one place to another. Then it grew to the missiles and the capabilities that they have now and manufacture. And of course, they constantly advance in cyber warfare too, and intelligence against Israel. Meaning, well, that means that in Israel, they already know. They know that Hamas, you cannot disarm them. They're there to stay, and it's understood. But there's one person who is refusing really to show that there is any option for Hamas to remain. And that man is called Benjamin Netanyahu because he wants to remain in his position. He wants to remain in his position, and he does not want to end this war. Now, what are they doing and how are they doing on the ground? Israel began this new campaign with an embargo on the Gaza Strip, total blockade. Over 50 days, nothing is going into the Gaza Strip. No weapons, no food, no medicine, nothing of the sort. And the people are starving to death. And now, inside of Israel, there is more pressure, growing pressure, coming from families of people who are actively fighting, especially after these confirmations coming from Israel that people are being killed now, and Israel is admitting. Now there are reports in Israel that they are forced to withdraw. So there was one report in Israel, well, multiple reports, talking about the IDF withdrawing untrained soldiers, they're saying, untrained soldiers from the Gaza Strip. After many parents appealed to army commanders, the IDF will withdraw Golani's training soldiers from the Gaza Strip and cancel the operation training soldiers from the paratrooper and Givati brigades. What do you mean not trained? Firstly, no one's trained. That's number one. No one in Israel is trained to fight an urbanicide warfare. Gaza is totally destroyed, and people are fighting from the rubble. In Israel, those who were trained in the Israeli army, some of them did train on urban warfare, resembling areas similar to Gaza as much as possible. But no one was trained on fighting and destruction. So Benjamin Netanyahu and his government were sending people to die knowingly, knowing that they are not trained, knowing that they do not have the expertise, and they're not equipped with the relevant information, training, background, all of that to go and fight there. But this is showing you that the Israeli army is being forced to take action under the excuse of them being untrained. Well, if they're untrained, why don't you send them in the first place anyway? But it's because their parents are applying pressure, and the Israeli army is giving in to the pressure that is coming from the parents. Now, moving on to the next thing that I wanted to talk to you about. Israel is facing, of course, a big rebellion from within. Many people are signing these petitions, over 140,000 in total. It started off with the Air Force fighter pilots, and it's growing day by day. And now there has been a new statement coming out from one of the people who initiated the letter from the Air Force personnel inside of Israel, declaring again that the purpose of the war is to maintain the prime minister status. Nothing but that. Benjamin Netanyahu is not interested in getting anything done with Hamas, dismantling Hamas, getting rid, all victory, let alone getting the prisoners of war back, because now the government ministers are outright saying we're not interested in them. They're not the priority. Now this man is saying the purpose is to maintain the prime minister status. He wants to delay this for as long as possible. Now, there was another interesting thing happening several days back. Something very interesting and very dangerous at the same time. It's not the first time that it happened, but the fact that it happened now, reported just over a week ago, raises alarm bells. Why? Because it's coinciding with the rebellion that started primarily from the Israeli Air Force, gradually and very quickly as well, stretched to the paratroopers, the military, people all across, protests all across of Israel. Like I said, over 140,000 signatories. Israel accidentally bombs its own settlement near Gaza due to technical difficulties. How can you bomb Israel due to technical difficulties? What, did you accidentally press the button to land a bomb on Nir Yitzhak? It's called Kibbutz Nir Yitzhak. That's next to the Gaza Strip. And according to this report, it wasn't the first time that the fighter jets, not the helicopters, like the helicopters massacred the people on the Nova Festival on the 7th of October, even though some fighter jets were included at the time, by the way. But this wasn't the only one after those incidents, after Israel killed its own people on the 7th of October. There were other strikes afterwards. Okay, what else happened? Well, according to this report, it wasn't only this attack in Nir Yitzhak, basically an IDF pilot landing a bomb on an Israeli kibbutz. They also said that the Israeli army, the Israeli Air Force, landed a half-ton bomb on the border of Moshav Yated in May, previously, last year. And that was considered to be exceptional, rare, and dangerous. Now, the Israeli army spoke about this report, and they had a comment. Their comment was, it was a technical malfunction. A short while ago, they said, munitions dropped from a fighter jets during an attack in the Gaza Strip fell in an open area in Kibbutz Nir Yitzhak, as a result of a technical malfunction. Okay? I mean, mistakes do happen. Yeah, mistakes do happen, absolutely. But advanced fighter jets, advanced technology, is it really likely to happen more than once with, well, they have a track record of killing their own people, but coinciding with rebellion coming from within, especially from the Israeli pilots? Was there an Israeli pilot who had enough and wanted to send a message, pretended to be wanting to land a bomb in Gaza and then landed on Israel to prove a point? Maybe. Who knows? It's an option, isn't it? I mean, we've seen in the past 17 months that many things are possible, including the things that we didn't think were possible, especially with the level of hatred coming from people from within the Israeli army towards Benjamin Netanyahu and towards the ministers, because to them, they are viewing an implementation of mass neglect, mass slaughter, mass homicide, the killing of many Israelis, alongside, of course, the crimes in Gaza. That's for those who have some sort of empathy to anything Palestinian, empathy or sympathy. I mean, more and more people are saying that, but let's say these people who fought, got back, they're seeing that the prime minister is going against ceasefire agreements. That's leading to more prisoners of war being killed, more reports in the mainstream media in Israel that Israel killed previous prisoners of war, that 42 of them were killed due to bombings from who? From Israel. And now they've had enough. They've had enough because they're seeing that their own government is killing its own people. It's not there to defend. It's not there to protect the Israeli prisoners of war or save them or get them out, but it's there to kill them. They want to get rid of them. And the Israeli foreign minister and the Israeli finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich's statement that caused a lot of havoc in Israel, many people criticized it, saying that the prisoners of war are not the first priority. That's also something. So could this be a reason that this accident happened? Israel bombing accidentally its own settlement? Perhaps. Who knows? Everything is possible now, especially with the climate that's happening inside of Israel. Now, moving on to the next subject, America, the land of free speech, the beacon of freedom and democracy, the land of the Statue of Liberty, the champions of freedom all across the world, they have been conducting a campaign of silencing and terrorizing the movement that is calling for a ceasefire, that's criticizing the genocide and calling for a ceasefire. Now, universities, Donald Trump himself, the country itself, exporting, deporting people, imprisoning, kidnapping them from the streets, security forces in civilian clothes, they go and kidnap people for speaking up against the genocide. I thought the United States was supposed to be the beacon of freedom and liberty. Isn't the United States the beacon of freedom and liberty, with the Statue of Liberty like that, raising that? And everyone can say whatever they want. I thought they were like that. What happened? Anyway, the unis are not giving in. Over 150 college presidents signed letter rebuking Trump administration overreach. Especially, well, some of the largest universities too, but it's stretching to, well, diverse universities in very many locations inside of the United States. Trump threatening them with sanctions, basically stopping the funding, taking away their money, bullying, mafia approach. And thankfully, not all of them are giving in. there are movements now coming from the universities against Donald Trump, similar to the mass protests that we saw in the United States in the past couple of weeks against the Trump administration. Now there is growing action against them. However, how powerful would these people be, and would they be able to stop the Trump administration from continuing this campaign for freedom, this campaign for liberty, this campaign for freedom of speech, to protect freedom of speech? Well, to understand that, we need to know what's happening. Now, there was this report here on the Palestine Chronicle from Miss Rachel to anti-war college students, the end of the American free speech, they called it. And in it, they were talking about, well, the actual campaign or project called Project Esther. What's Project Esther? A 33-page document published in October last year by the Heritage Foundation. And the US government teamed up with extremist elements from the Zionist lobby to crush criticism of Israel. From its recommendations to form a federal task force, to combat alleged anti-Semitism, which is really just criticism of the Israeli government, to its strategy to tear down leading academic institutions. The plan is being followed. The Heritage Foundation, most well known for its Project 2025, is known to possess considerable influence on the Trump White House. Of course they do. Yet they continue, despite obvious influence and policy recommendations that are being followed almost down to the letter. There has been little connection drawn between these think tank documents and Donald Trump's anti-free speech crusade. So, well, there's a project behind it with task force and draconian measures being taken by the United States government, but it's not going very well with the people complying. Why? Because they are keen to protect their freedoms, especially the universities and activists as well. Now, it's not just stopping with the universities. There were also actions being taken by organizations in the United States. For example, this Organization of American Historians that voted to condemn Israeli scholasticide in Gaza, the mass homicide, mass slaughter of scholars and students. According to the report, there 10,000 students were killed, thousands of teachers, scientists inside of the Gaza Strip, of course, let alone the doctors and the nurses and the healthcare staff and the journalists and everyone. They're outright saying it's a scholasticide, not just a genocide. And Israel is doing that deliberately, meaning, well, despite Donald Trump's draconian measures and approach to stop this criticism from happening, clearly there are people who are not only fighting, but taking the battle to the next level, calling for more action and not stopping, not backing down, despite all of the pressure that's coming from Donald Trump. And if this continues, it's going to be very difficult for the US establishment to continue and have so much resources against people who are simply practicing their basic right of free speech, because it requires a lot of resources. If you're going to talk about hundreds of thousands or millions of people protesting, taking action, well, how much resources do you need to stop these people? So it's going to be very difficult for the administration to stop that, despite the fact that they are tied with the extreme elements within the Zionist lobby in the United States, with what was labeled as the Project Esther, to shut down any criticism coming from Israel, because the movement has become simply too big for them. And these were the main things that I wanted to share with you in this live stream. As usual, I hope I shed some light for you and added some more information about the recent developments. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening, day, and night, depending on where you are. And I will see you soon in the next video. Peace, everyone. Salam.